And Your Honor, for ease, this is starting of the Act 159.
Okay, thank you.
Officer Rogers, where are you employed?
City of Atlanta Police Department.
And how long have you been with the City of Atlanta Police Department?
I just entered my 14th year.
And if you can tell the jury briefly about your history with the Atlanta Police Department.
While at the Atlanta Police Department, worked patrol for a little while before moving over to the Special Operations Section. Did about 8 years there before moving over to Special Enforcement, where I did time at the Auto Crimes Unit, and my last assignment there was at gangs before my incident.
And we're going to talk about your incident in a moment.
Yes, ma'am.
When you were a patrol officer, what zone did you work for?
I started in Zone 6.
And did you work any other zones as a patrol officer?
No, ma'am.
All right. Now, you said that your last assignment prior to your incident was you working in gangs.
Yes, ma'am.
What did you do while you worked in gangs?
While on gangs, we were tasked with proactive enforcement, keeping up with wanted gang members and the apprehension of those persons, and that was about the gist of it.
And how long did you work as an officer in the gang unit?
I was only there for 8 months.
And in those 8 months while you worked as an officer in the gang unit, what, if anything, did you do differently than the investigators in the gang unit?
Typically, we were out in the streets more, certain high crime areas, presence, things of that nature.
And as an officer with the gang unit, did you have a specific zone that you worked, or did you work the entire city of Atlanta?
Citywide.
And how closely did you work with the investigators in the gang unit as an officer in the gang unit?
We worked hand in hand. If they had certain targets or subjects that they wanted apprehended, we would go out and look for them.
And was that one of the primary responsibilities as an officer to assist with the apprehension of suspects?
Yes, ma'am.
I want to direct your attention to February 7th, 2022.
Okay.
Were you working that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was your normal shift when you worked as an officer with the gang unit?
My normal shift was Tuesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
And let me ask, in 2022, were you working as an officer in the gang unit?
Yes, ma'am.
When you began your shift today, were you assigned to assist in any apprehensions on that day, February 7th, 2022?
At the start of that day, we didn't have any activity. We were actually waiting on fugitive to go and serve a paper that day, or serve a warrant that day. And we were made aware that the target got mobile, and that's when we were called.
And who was the target that fugitive was looking to arrest that day?
Mr. Christian Eppinger, for the charges of armed robbery and aggravated assault, I believe the case was.
And how did you get involved with the apprehension of Mr. Eppinger?
Well, we were contacted by the surveillance investigator at the time, Investigator Storno, and so we made our way from Marietta Boulevard over to Cleveland Avenue. Me and my partner for the day, we staged for a little bit and briefed while we tried to gather more resources and be updated on current information of his status and whereabouts.
Okay. And you said your partner for the day, let me first ask you, was your partner in the same vehicle as you?
No, ma'am, we were in 2 separate cars.
Okay. And if you're in separate cars, how was that he was your partner for the day?
We typically do everything in twos, but we were the only 2 officers for my unit working that day.
And who was this other officer?
Officer J. Teasley.
Teasley?
Yes, ma'am.
Teasley?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And you said that, were you both at Marietta prior to getting the call to assist?
We were in the area. I was on Marietta Boulevard. I don't know his specific location on the west side that day, but we were over there.
And you said that once you received the call to assist, is that when you made your way over from Marietta Boulevard to Cleveland Avenue?
Yes, ma'am.
Once you got over to Cleveland Avenue, did you go directly on Cleveland Avenue or did you stage somewhere else prior to getting on Cleveland Avenue?
No, ma'am. Prior to, so we briefed him and myself. We briefed on the side of the Interstate 75 just before Cleveland. Talked about what we were going to do and who we were looking for, what he was wearing, things of that nature. Tried to gather more resources as far as zone crime suppression units. I think I called upon the fugitive unit that day, but they were tied up doing something else.
Now, do you remember what the description was that you were given for him?
We were told black jacket, white pants. I believe it was an orange hoodie.
Tell us what happened once you got over to Cleveland Avenue.
All right. After the brief, Investigator Storno told us that he had left the gas station and was out on foot.
Just a second. If you hear an objection, if you'll just pause.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
It's okay. I know it's a little bit hard to hear. Everybody needs to use their mics. Hearsay.
Yes.
Your effect on the listener.
Sustained.
Okay. Without telling,
I'm sorry, overruled. Overruled.
based upon what Investigator Storno said, what did you all do?
He told us he was on foot walking from the gas station into the condominium complex. At that time, we left the side of the interstate, moved in, coming down Cleveland Avenue, turned on the Steel Road, at which time I locked eyes on Mr. Eppinger, pulled into the complex.
Let me stop you right here. Mm-hmm. You said the condos in which he was going to. Do you recall the name of those condos?
I don't. The address, I believe, is 2637 Old Hateville. I don't know the exact name. The Steel Road entrance, I don't think it's a specific signage at that entrance. I think the signage is on the other side.
Have you heard of Colonial Square Apartments?
Yes, ma'am.
Does that sound familiar? No.
Not at the moment.
Okay, that's fine. Is this location within Fulton County?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you said that the address is 2637 Old Hateville Road. Mm-hmm. Does the apartment complex have multiple entrances?
Yes.
Okay. Is one of those entrances on Old Hateville?
Yes, ma'am.
And is the other on Steel?
Yes, ma'am.
If you can just describe for the jury, if you're on Cleveland Avenue, what are some landmarks where that apartment complex is?
Steel Road sits between now it's a Chevron and a Checkers restaurant. I think the address, well, I don't remember the exact address for the Chevron at Cleveland, but it's Steel Road sits in between the Chevron right there at Cleveland and Interstate 75 and the Checkers.
Okay. Once you got onto Cleveland Avenue, what did you do?
Turn left on the Cleveland Avenue, coming southbound from the interstate. We crossed the overpass, pulled up at Steel Road, made a left turn onto Steel Road, at which time I could see Mr. Eppinger walking through the complex, at which time I made to go make contact with Mr. Eppinger. And
at the time when you went to go make contact with him, were you inside of the gate at 2637 Old Hateville Road?
Yes, ma'am. It was it's a block of homes right there at the entrance. I think I remember him being on the sidewalk.
And at that time, once you made entrance inside, do you know where your partner was?
I don't. Last I checked, he was behind me, turning off of Cleveland Ave on the Steel Road.
Okay. Once you got into the apartment complex and you see who you believe to be Mr. Eppinger, what did you do?
I tried to pull ahead of Mr. Eppinger, get out. I gave him commands, advising him that he did have paper. Also, told him he had warrants. He kind of looked at me, looked past me, proceeded to walk past me. At this time, I'm traveling behind Mr. Eppinger. I go to put hands on him, start to pull on him and things of that nature. And as I'm pulling on him, trying to grab him, I kind of start to look over my shoulder trying to locate my partner because Mr. Eppinger at the time was non-compliant, still walking, still kind of doing what he was doing. And when my partner wasn't there at that time, I chose to transition from lethal force, downgraded to my taser. Went to go tase Mr. Eppinger, but when I went to go access my taser, I couldn't drop the hood. I didn't drop the hood, and so when I turned my body to access it with my right hand is when I started feeling these shots.
So let's kind of slow that down, okay? Let me ask you this. At the time and when you went to go apprehend Mr. Eppinger, did you have your body cam on?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you have dash cam in your vehicle?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Now you said that you got out the car and you went to go and grab him. When you got out the car, did you have your gun?
Yes, ma'am. I had my gun drawn on him at first. Came out lethal force. He was known to carry weapons and things of that nature. And like I said, I go to put my hands on him because he kind of walks past me. After I told him who I was, announced my agency, let him know that he had warrants. He kept proceeding down the sidewalk. And so as I'm engaged with him, I'm kind of looking back over my shoulder for my partner, and he isn't coming, so I had to switch to another plan since I wasn't physically able to overcome him. And so at that time, I holstered my weapon and decided to switch over to my taser. Had trouble accessing my taser.
What made you decide to switch from your gun to your taser?
Just the sheer size of him. I knew I wasn't going to be able to overpower him, but at the time, he didn't have anything in his hands. And so I felt it necessary to transition.
Okay. And so when you went to go transition to your taser, were you able to draw your taser out?
No, ma'am. I stumbled with my taser, with my left hand, at which time I reached over with my right. And at that point, he had flanked me and started to fire upon me.
Okay. And when you say he started to flank you, what did that mean?
So he had veered off to my right side.
Okay. And then did you see when he drew his weapon?
I did not.
Okay. What was the first thing that you felt?
Just a warm sensation. But I knew something was wrong because when I went to re-access my weapon, I could not have use of that arm. And when I turned around to track his person, all I remember seeing was the muzzle of the gun, the white pants, the black jacket. But at that point, I was pretty much out of the fight.
And we say you were out of the fight, what do you mean?
It's even after reaching for him, I feel like I remember reaching for him with my left hand, but my body was kind of beginning to shut down, probably from the blood loss. I don't know.
Okay. And once you started feeling those, like that bullets and that impact, where did you end up? Were you on the ground? What happened?
I remember after looking at him, I remember turning away. I feel like I took a knee. I might have even laid on my face. I sat there for a minute. I gathered myself. I got on radio, let radio know I was shot. And then at that point, Investigator Johnson came over to render aid. He pulled me around the corner, and yeah.
Okay. And after that, were you taken to the hospital?
Yes, ma'am. We waited on the ambulance for a little bit, but we kind of had a talk and a discussion, and I just requested to be put in one of the UC cars, and we made our way to Grady.
And so you said you were talking. Were you alert at the time after being shot?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you eventually make it to Grady?
Yes, ma'am.
And what were the injuries that you had as a result of this shooting?
Well, I was informed that I was shot 6 times, once to the back of the head, 4 to the back of the right shoulder, and 1 to the back of the right leg.
And did you have to spend some time at Grady because of your injuries?
Yes, ma'am. I did about 7 days in the hospital.
And are you now back to work at this point?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Court's indulgence for a moment. I'm going to show you What's been first amended as 32B. Do you recognize the individual who was depicted in State Exhibit 32V?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I recognize him to be Christian Eppinger.
And I'm also going to show you 18V. Do you recognize who's that in 18V?
Yes, ma'am. That profile looks similar to his.
And I want to zoom in on 18V. Are you able to see what is depicted on the side of his face?
No, ma'am. I'm not able to make that out.
Okay. All right. I have no further questions.
Any defense questions for this witness?
Just one or two, Your Honor.
All right.
Officer Rogers, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
You hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. If I heard you correctly, you found out, or you came to find out after the fact, after your encounter with this guy, that you were shot a total of 6 times?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You were taken to the hospital, and you were there for a period of time before you recovered?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you are back to work at this time?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you described the person who was on the screen, the person you encountered, the guy you encountered as a Mr. Eppinger?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right. I'm sorry that happened to you, sir. Thank you for your questions. That's all I have. For your answers. That's all I have.
Any other? All right.
Officer, good afternoon. You don't see that gentleman in this courtroom, correct?
No, sir.
No further questions. Thank you, sir.
Anybody else?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
All right. Officer, thank you for your time, and you are excused.